For those who don't know or haven't been on my channel long enough, I've stated many times that Lilo & Stitch is my all-time favorite Disney movie, and I've shown it a couple times by looking at the Lilo & Stitch video games, more specifically the console and handheld versions, and back when I did parodies, I did one on a specific series that, at long last, I'm finally going to talk about. Though a lot of people generally know this anime exists, and you could kind of say I'm late to the party, but believe it or not, there's actually some things you don't know about this series. So, did you know that there was a Stitch anime? Let's talk about it. Even though a lot of people generally know what Lilo & Stitch is, it's still important to learn about the history of the series in order to understand the anime adaptation. Lilo & Stitch was one of Disney's newest original movies that was originally going to air back in 2001. But the film was postponed into 2002 due to a deleted scene that had to be changed due to real-world events. The movie was about a young Hawaiian girl named Lilo who meets Experiment 626, who she happens to name Stitch. Stitch is a genetically made experiment made by Dr. Jumbo Jukiba, who was built only for destruction and knew nothing of compassion or even family until staying with Lilo, learning about the importance of Ohana. The film was a massive success, leading to many different sequels, one of which would lead to an animated series, both as a pilot and as a finale, a live-action remake that's going to feature Zach Galifianakis, and making appearances in other Disney media. Stitch has always been this really out-of-nowhere character who really doesn't fit in with the Disney brand in some way or form, but that's why I think what makes Stitch such a great character. And it's even shown through the crossovers. In fact, that's actually how Stitch was actually introduced to a lot of different Disney kids, as there were tons of trailers introducing Stitch as he would appear in many different Disney Renaissance films like Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, and Aladdin. And when Stitch had a TV series, he literally had a crossover with other well-known cartoons from the Disney Channel network like Recess, Kim Possible, and The Proud Family. And I think it's thanks to Stitch's design and characteristics, he was a very popular character outside of the US, especially in Japan, to where Disney decided to make an anime adaptation, which will be known as just Stitch. Made possible by Walt Disney Television International Japan and the anime studio Madhouse. Yes, the same Madhouse studio that you might know and love and or hate depending on what anime they adapt. And the first season aired from October 8th of 2008 to June 26th of 2009. The anime starts with Stitch causing havoc across the galaxy until one day he crash lands on Hawaii, and then meets a young Hawaiian girl named Yuna, a more tomboyish character who specializes in martial arts. They don't get along at first, but warm up to one another over time, being a part of her Ohana, or the anime's iteration of it, Ichariba Chode, which is the main theme of this series, which means, even though we just met, we are family. After being accepted into Yuna's Ohana, Stitch would learn about the Sacred Stone and how if he does 42 good deeds, he will be given a wish, and he wants his unlimited power. Jumba gives him a watch that counts all the good deeds that Stitch is capable of doing until he reaches 42, so he can get that wish he deserves. Now, obviously, when it comes to the anime adaptation, you're probably wondering, where the heck is Lilo? Well, there is one scene that kind of explains it, but there's also something that you should know about that scene. It's actually not true. Sort of. I first want to actually explain how the anime was adapted. I did actually watch the English dub of this series, but there's a lot of things that you don't know about this English dub. For starters, the anime was not dubbed in US. It was actually dubbed in Australia. So I can consider this not an American dub, but an Australian dub of the anime. Hence why the cast seems so much different from the US release of the anime. Though it was dubbed in Australia, it did air in other parts of the country, and eventually in the US, but only 5 episodes ever aired on Disney XD in 2011, only to have the anime completely removed 5 days later from the channel, probably due to how the dub was mishandled. And I don't just mean that one scene from episode 1. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, at the beginning of the anime, Jumba actually says this one line,
"Just because little girl Lilo has new boyfriend now and is all washed up with 626 is no reason to act bad."
And when people heard that Lilo ditched Stitch for a boy, that actually got the fan base really pissed off. And it's kind of understandable why. With Lilo & Stitch being a show all about family, it's kind of insulting to say that your family would ditch you after you just meet some guy or girl. But that's the thing. That actually never happened in the Japanese version. This is actually what Jumba actually said in this scene in Japanese. That one scene was added by the Australian dub to interconnect it with the anime. meaning this scene actually never happens in the Japanese adaptation. In fact, Lilo is actually never mentioned in the anime. And by the anime, I actually mean the first 2 seasons of the anime. I'll explain why after season 2. But what I also find very interesting is every YouTuber I've seen talk about this anime never addresses the Japanese version. Now that might be because some people were just watching the dub version just so they can easily analyze what's up with the series and what's wrong with it. But no, they don't talk about the Japanese version because they just watch the dub version, but a Japanese version with subtitles hardly even exists. I even looked at the most shady of anime watching sites and they only have the dubbed version of the anime. But I managed to luck out on finding the first episode in subtitles and learning about what Jumba actually said in that scene. Unfortunately, that does mean I couldn't really watch the entire anime this way. After digging through more information about the anime, I actually learned more stuff about the Australian dub. There are actually 26 episodes of season 1 of the anime, but the dub actually edits it down to 22 episodes as well as air them out of order. So when you see Stitch get random numbers go up in different episodes, a lot of the episodes are played out of order and some of them are even just shortened down into short episodes. One of the best examples is that Felix Experiment 010 actually appears in episode 4 of the dub, but he doesn't appear until episode 9, making episode 9 of the dub actually episode 10. And it just gets even more confusing from there. Another thing that a lot of people generally take for granted about the series, but a lot of people should also know about this too, but Stitch was also originally planned to be its own canon entirely. Sure, the premise of the series is fairly similar to the movie, with Stitch landing on an island, becoming best friends with a young girl, and learning to appreciate family. And obviously, the original version is always going to be the best, but I think it would be wrong not to say having its own adaptation would be a bad thing. There are tons of different medias with their own unique adaptations. Some people will always prefer the other, but it would be wrong to not appreciate what other adaptations do. Does that mean the anime is good? It's kind of more okay if you ask me. The island doesn't just include Yuna and her grandmother. For example, best friend Taro, who is the anime equivalent to Millhouse. There are tons of other different people around this island. We don't really get much development. There's a school teacher.
Smash.
And lastly, there is the child rivals, this time being the brother and sister team, Penny and her brother Kenny, and they suck. A lot of people also have a lot of gripes with the animation, but considering it is an anime adaptation compared to a Western animation, it's completely fair why people would have gripes with it. Animation in Japan is a lot cheaper to make, but it's also a lot easier to get things done. I'm not going to say it's good, but I think the anime does try its best to blend the Lilo and Stitch style into the Japanese adaptation. And in hindsight, it actually is completely fair to make a Japanese adaptation of Stitch. For one thing, the anime still respects Hawaiian culture, which makes sense considering there's a lot of Japanese culture within Hawaiian culture as well. While Lilo and Stitch shows the side of Hawaiian culture in America, with the island Lilo lives on being based off Kauai, while Stitch is actually more based off the Japanese side through the island of Okinawa. I even referenced this in my Stitch Abridged one-shot.
That's on Kauai. This is Okinawa.
With there being more inspiration of Japanese culture, the series expands on more than the tropical island. There's also a look at the folklore of Hawaiian culture through yokai, such as one of the newest characters in the series, Kijimuna, a young red-headed yokai who, if you actually search his name on Google, you'll actually find the anime adaptation of this character, showing how obscure this yokai truly is. Of course, there will be some inclusions from the original Western series, such as Jumba and Pleakley staying on the island to keep an eye on Stitch, Gantu, Reuben, and Hamsterville trying to kidnap Stitch and or take the power of the spiritual stone, and even a couple of other experiments like Experiment 624, Angel, Experiment 221, Sparky, and again, Felix 010. I didn't know why he was added in this season. Also, I find it really interesting that there's an episode dedicated to 625 learning how to make rice balls, or onigiri, which is almost sandwich-like, but is an onigiri actually a sandwich? That's more something I'm going to leave to you guys in the comment section. Stitch so far hasn't been as awful as people state it is, as the animation does its best to keep close to the style of the original series, with some of the limitations found in most anime nowadays. Not to mention who the target demographic was for the series was children, as the anime has quite a few episodes dedicated towards morals for children, and it makes sense to give morals to a chaotic blue beast like Stitch. I mean, considering what anime have come out after this series released, maybe people were being too harsh about the series. But let's see if Season 2 is where the series gets better, or worse. Season 2, or Stitch, the Mischievous Alien's Great Adventure, was still developed again by Madhouse and aired from October 13th of 2009 to June 29th of 2010. It also added some brand new inclusions, more specifically characters, such as a little purple alien named Bugu, who honestly adds nothing to the series whatsoever. She was just an inclusion, probably just to make plushies. We also get to see more of Stitch's cousins throughout the episodes, as Hamsterville brings them to attack Stitch in order to take the Spiritual Stone. Even an episode dedicated to 627, who I hear is canonically named Evil, though unfortunately he only appears in one episode, and I thought he would actually have more development through the series instead of just being a one-off bad guy. They also add some new characters into the show, like Sasha, a new character added because Yuna literally has no other friends that are her same age or gender, and God forbid we're not giving that to Penny. We're also introduced to Tiger Lily, who's Yuna's cousin. She was added as like an evil cousin for Yuna to coincide with Stitch in a way, but she technically has her moments. I don't really see it in Season 2. She also returns in Season 3, but we'll get to that. And we also get our main antagonist in the final episode of the series, Experiment Zero, a failed experiment made by Jumbo before he even started giving the experiments numbers. And honestly, this anime is a total mess. This season was a total mess in my general opinion, mostly because there's a lot of issues with both the writing as well as the episode structure. The episodes were yet again altered, with a couple of episodes being merged into one, and even one entire episode being completely removed altogether. There was also a few errors you can easily find in the anime, such as the anime calling the Spiritual Stone the Jitama Stone, its proper name, a few times in the season, only to go back to calling it the Spiritual Stone. Though there are a lot of episodes dedicated to Stitch's cousins, they still try to deal with different types of yokais and other iconic ones that a lot of people are familiar with, and some that we don't even know are considered yokai or not. The Halloween episode literally features Dracula Jr. of all characters. Though I will generally say Season 2 does have some good moments, such as actually giving development with Yuna's dad, who unfortunately I don't really get to talk about much of because the anime doesn't want to talk about him either. But there was also a dedicated episode to Yuna's mom, and considering it's owned by Disney, yeah, she's clearly dead. And probably one of the weirdest episodes of all time, this season had an episode dedicated to Disneyland Japan, which is even more crazy as well as meta. One of my biggest problems with the anime is the plot device as a whole. I'm of course referring to Stitch's good deed counter. As Season 2 does wrap up, Stitch actually succeeds in his goal and manages to do 42 good deeds, and instead of wishing for ultimate power, he just wishes to stay with Yuna. Feels more like a cop-out if you ask me, but the wish rock and the good deed system makes Stitch come across more selfish than really doing good deeds because he learns what it means to be good. He just wants a wish. Not to mention, with the clashing of aliens and yokai, their stories clash instead of better develop the plot, making Season 2, in my general opinion, the worst season, with its inability to better write its older characters and add more unnecessary characters who really don't add anything. This would also be the last season with Madhouse, as Season 3 would be given to a different studio where they changed the anime entirely to the point where I consider its own canon, which is what we're going to be talking about next. This is Season 3, or as it's properly named, Stitch Best Friends Forever, originally airing July 6th of 2010, and then concluding in June 19th of 2011, a week after Season 2. And this time taking the helm was Shinai Animation, the same studio behind anime such as Shin-chan, Doraemon, and The World Ends With You, the animation. Unfortunately, this change in studio would obviously lead to not just the change in animation, but also the plot itself. This season, however, Yuna and Stitch actually move with Tiger Lily into the city, which is called Newtown. Very original. But yet again, Hamsterville is after Stitch, but we actually learn why he's after Stitch this time, as Hamsterville wants this power cell inside his body that gives him his ultimate power, and Hamsterville plans on retrieving it to our true main antagonist of the series, Delia.
Smash.
Of course, moving into a new area, we're also introduced to some other brand new characters, such as popular soccer player Takumi, who for some reason the dub is named Hero Man, even though Japan already has a Hero Man, that Disney might technically now own, who has this cool dude attitude, and the dub gives him too many soccer puns, making it like his one and only character trait. But we actually learn that Takumi is actually a pretty cool guy. We're also introduced to the female love interest for Takumi, Jessica, a popular girl who makes puns so bad, they put dad jokes to shame. And in all honesty, is probably the best rival in the series, but then again, considering you had to be put up against Myrtle and Penny, that's really not saying much, and somehow Penny is still worse than Myrtle. I mean, for God's sakes, she's a Republican.
Show me your papers!
I don't have any!
There's also Dolores, the typical smart character with glasses, and Delia, the true main antagonist of the series, who Hamsterville has been assisting because he's a simp. With all the changes Shinai made, they also changed the art style as well. A lot of people generally have a lot of gripes with the animation style of the anime, especially with Season 3. But for those of you who don't know, they actually did alter Yuna and Stitch's design so they can actually properly blend with the anime, so they don't stand out as much as they already do. Not to mention, this is the only season in the anime where none of the episodes were cut down or even flat out removed. Every episode is in English. The only real change is that only a couple of episodes are poured out of order, but with most episodes being episodic, it wasn't really noticeable. And I'm generally gonna admit, there are actually a lot of cool stuff that actually happens in this anime. Some of Stitch's cousins do return from the show, but a good amount of them were also given brand new abilities thanks to Hamsterville, and there are some brand new experiments that were never before seen in the show. Like Experiment 110, Toons, who turns people's drawings into reality, making him one of the cursed characters in the series because of how much people would abuse its power. Oh, that reminds me, I got an album of, food, that's it, food. Heck, there's actually an episode where they actually bring a samurai into the modern age, and he fights Kicks of all characters. Wonder if this will lead to a manga spin-off. Dub isn't perfect, obviously. I mean, they literally mistake Heat Blast for Splody Head, even though he appeared in episode 1, and they got his name right in the finale. Speaking of the finale, early on in the season, we actually get a time travel episode, where we actually learn how Stitch was made using a rare energy inside of him, made possible by the collision of two planets, that gives Stitch his superhuman ability, giving us a better understanding why Delia was after them, and is trying to use that power inside of him to take over the galaxy. Instead of capturing Stitch, Delia decides to actually recreate a powerful version of that energy that made Stitch so powerful, creating her own experiment she names Darkside. They do build up his menacing power, but the finale did mess up on some parts, making the final battle a little too cartoonish, if you ask me. And that's saying a lot considering this is based off a cartoon. But now it's time to address the elephant in the room. And you're probably wondering what I thought about the Lilo episode. With this being its own canon entirely, they decided to actually unite both story elements into one, which may have led to that infamous dubbed line. After all, it does take a while for an anime to be properly dubbed outside of Japan. And I think this episode was actually the best one in the series. We know something happened between Stitch and Lilo, and the connection between them wasn't going to be addressed in the original anime by Madhouse, being its own canon and all. But Shinai did a great job balancing this reuniting of Stitch and Lilo pretty well. In fact, Season 3 might be my favorite season. I know people have gripes with the animation, but I found a lot of the episodes entertaining and even funny at times. Though its final battle was disappointing, I didn't flat out hate this season because I think this is the closest they got to recapturing the original series. Without the Wish Rock plot, Stitch and Yuna's relationship felt more weighted. When Stitch screws up and feels guilty about something, or when Yuna tries to defend Stitch when people are against him, you feel a true bond they've made more within this adaptation. This is probably the closest they've gotten to recapturing what made the original Lilo and Stitch series so good. But this wouldn't be the last adaptation of Stitch we'd see. There was also two 40-minute specials, Stitch in the Planet of Sand and Stitch Perfect Memory, where Stitch rescues Yuna with the help of a robot that looks like Susie from Kirby Planet Robobot. There was also Stitch and the Samurai, a 3-volume manga series about Stitch landing in feudal-era Japan, meeting a samurai believing Stitch is a blue tanuki, and is given the name Suteichi. There's also the Chinese animated series Stitch and I, and that's probably its own canon as well, to best represent China, and there's also the Disney Chibi World, that actually has its own segments dedicated to Lilo and Stitch, even though it features a wide barrage of Disney Channel shows, whether they were animated or not. And that's basically it. That is everything I can say about the Stitch anime, with a few extra things there, of course. After watching every episode of the Stitch anime, what do I honestly think about it? The early version of the dub, I think, is truly awful how they altered what made the series so important. But for some moments, I thought the anime was pretty enjoyable. I would say if you're curious about the series, I would ask anyone to try their best to find the proper Japanese version with the proper English subtitles. But unfortunately, most of it no longer exists. You can watch the anime on Disney+, but only if you live in Japan, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. But if they were ever to release this adaptation for the first time in the US, I would like a proper redub of the series, having the original voices of the show, having a proper episode structured how it was originally aired, and the choice to either watch it in English and Japanese. If I can watch the Owl House in Japanese with subtitles, then I should be able to watch the show with either version. People will always prefer the original series, myself included, but that doesn't mean other adaptations should exist. Stitch is well loved by people all over the world, and his series is all about Ohana, which means family, and family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And I think the Stitch anime shouldn't be forgotten. And let's be honest, it'll be far better than the crappy live adaptation coming out, that's for sure. Hey guys, this is AngelStar. Just wanted to say thanks for watching. This is a little unscripted because I just wanted to come out and say thank you for 4,000 subscribers. I know it's not much considering how many people can subscribe to very easy, but sometimes less is usually more to me. I know I've been promising this project for a while and now it is completely done. After making this video, I kind of want to do more projects on Lilo and Stitch on a year-to-year basis, like talk about the sequels, my favorite experiment. But I do have other projects I will be working on, and not to mention I have tons of other goals on different other medias. So thanks again for watching. This has been the AngelStar, signing off.